Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I am your host, Matthew Pejkovic, and this is episode number 583. Releasing on digital this January 24 is Welcome to the Darkness, a documentary that chronicles the comeback of British rockers The Darkness over a decade after their multi-platinum success during the early 2000s. An intimate and entertaining delve into the aftermath of obtaining rock star status and the personal and professional consequences of living life on the edge. Welcome to the Darkness is a must-watch for Darkness fan and novice alike. And joining me now is the director of Welcome to the Darkness, Mr. Simon Emmett. Simon, how are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. I was just saying to you before we started about I've watched a ton of rock and metal kind of documentaries, and Welcome to the Darkness has to be my favorite that I've seen so far. And one of the big reasons is I love the intimacy of the documentary. Other docs tend to really go a little overboard and blowing out the bells and whistles, animations here and that, and they don't put trust into the people themselves that they're documenting. You don't need to do, all the bells and whistles with the guys from the darkness because these guys are characters within their own. They're telling their story, and the way they tell it is just so remarkable. When it came to diving into how you wanted to tell this story, did you knew from the beginning that this is all about the guys and the guys only, that you weren't going to be adding any flourishes to that kind of stuff? Or does that kind of stuff kind of comes afterwards in post and in how you kind of cut it together and how you want to present it?
I think it was always when I first met them and we first spoke about the idea. For me, they're such an interesting bunch of guys. They've kind of got an incredible presence and charisma, and I like the band. I obviously have memories of them kind of almost taking over the world a few years back, and they were impossible to ignore. But for me,
Mm.
I found the people really compelling, and I felt very early on that it was a character study more than a film about the band. I wouldn't have been qualified to make the latter film. It wouldn't have been right for me to make that kind of film about them. I always kind of felt from very early on that it was a film about the guys who happened to be in the band as opposed to the other way around.
Please support Matt's movie reviews on Patreon. Get access to exclusive content, request movie reviews and top 10 lists, and help support my work. Please click on the Patreon link in the description below. From what I read, you met Dan and Justin briefly. I feel it was like at a party or something years and years ago. And at that time, when you guys are hanging out, you kind of brought up the idea more like in a jokey way. Hey, I should make a documentary with you guys, and that kind of just snowballed into what people are going to be seeing very soon. I'm curious though, when it came to delve into a documentary about the band at that point in their career, were you interested in what they were becoming as people and as a band, or were you interested in chronicling kind of what they were before? What type of approach were you kind of going into regarding to evolution of the band and these people?
I had a very open mind to it at that stage. I actually I find the kind of concept of fame and everything that goes around it quite kind of fascinating. It's something that I've always, I work a lot. I'm primarily a photographer and have worked with a lot of kind of known faces around. It's always interested me how people have this kind of relationship with fame, and it's never that straightforward. And for these guys, they kind of had this incredible meteoric rise, and this kind of window of huge success and everything else that goes with it. And so I was interested to understand, firstly what that's like on the inside, and secondly, if you've done it once, and why would you want to do it again? And I think that was for me the main question at the start. And that got answered on many levels going forward, because I think in the end, what became clear to me was that really the second time around they are just enjoying it so much. This time it's that old adage of, they say if you kind of do what you love, you won't work a day in your life. I think they work so hard, and it's quite a kind of grueling job they do, and a lot of the time, but they love it, and I think that comes across. So for me, it was more about understanding why, especially after the first time.
The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by TeePublic. TeePublic is the world's largest marketplace for independent creators to sell their work on the highest quality merchandise. With over 1.2 million designs, T Public is sure to have something you'll love. Well, what I always found with regards to rock bands, hard rock bands, is the cyclical nature of the industry in regards to fame with that genre. There's been so many bands that kind of like hit these multi-platinum success, and then like the next album will come out and wouldn't do well, and I had to go back to work in the bars and in smaller venues and such. The same thing happened with the Darkness. Had to come back, and we see in your documentary that they're like, they're doing small gigs on the boats, they're working in a bar and such. But what's really great about it is that this kind of humbling experience that they're going through, they meet it with the same spirit and the same sense of humor, and the same kind of attitude they would if they were playing Wembley in front of like thousands of people. They're still there, they're still doing the gig, they're still there to cater to the audience and entertain. And I think it says something about their character, not only as musicians, but as people, that even though, you know, at that moment they weren't, rocking to hundreds of thousands of people like they did before, they were going to put together a great gig, no matter. They weren't going to keep them down. I'm sure, as someone who's been around different people and seen different degrees of fame, that would have been quite the experience to see that humility didn't really deter their spirits in any way.
That's a really accurate assessment, because the first time me and the crew saw them live was in the pub in Ireland, and it was completely, it was just incredible. That they play every single gig they do. There is 100% goes into everything, and there's no judgment, there's no ego, certainly not in that aspect. That they are absolutely focused, and they do everything they can to make every single gig they do as good as possible. And I thought that was a really inspiring. That very early on became really inspiring for me. That was really compelling to kind of follow these guys who just, it didn't matter what they were doing, a pub, a boat, a holiday camp. It just didn't matter. It was the same every time. Just absolutely everything went into it, and I think that there's a lot to be said for that. There's a lot to be said for that kind of work ethic, the graft, the dedication, especially on you call it a comeback, but ultimately, it's that kind of laser focus they had during that period, because they certainly, I was lucky enough to catch them in that period where, in fairness to them, that there was a kind of few years where they were kind of, on the path back. Certainly, if I started filming them now, there's nothing to film. They're doing fantastically well again, and and good luck to them. They deserve it.
The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by Amazon Prime Video. One of the best on-demand streaming services available, Amazon Prime Video features exclusive Amazon originals as well as popular movies and TV shows. Watch Amazon Prime Video anytime, anywhere. The thing that really stands out for me in regards to the band is their sense of humor. If Monty Python were to make a cock rock band, I think they come close to looking like the Darkness. Not only really in the way that they approach the music and the exuberance of the delivery, but also in the lyrical content as well. There are scenes in the movie where the guys are doing some backing tracks in it, and they just had to burst out laughing because they're singing about like shitting gold bricks. It's phenomenal, but it's great as well. I imagine having that type of sense of humor, considering the tragic circumstances that come across the band, addiction, cancer diagnosis, etc. That's something that's great as well, I think, because I think people, they say it in the movie, you only live once, so don't take it, take it seriously, but not too seriously. Have fun with it. As Dan would say in one of his pre-concert kind of like speeches, bust out your biggest moves up there and give it all you got. I think that's a really great life philosophy for people to have. You got to bust out your big moves every day because you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring.
Yeah, I mean, and in that respect, you've kind of said it. That's kind of they take that everywhere they go. That's their kind of mentality, and the humor's there all the time, even when it's hard, even when they're struggling, or it's a grueling schedule. That's there all the time. I think that's the magic component. I don't think there would have been a film if these guys were dead, too serious, and just put a mask on stage, be a different persona, come off stage and be someone else. With these guys, they're just what they are, and I hope it shows, because I think that's one of the inspiring things.
having been around the darkness for such a long time with this movie, and this movie is very much a labor of love. When this started off, you guys had hardly any type of financing. It was you guys were relying on, the army, the darkest army, and you're relying on, different degrees of like financing to come from different places. So this was like a labor of love for you. When you're following them around and you're seeing them do all their different gigs and such, is there a gig? Is there a place? Is there a night that really kind of stands out for you? Do you really thought that the band was incredibly on fire and just gelled so well on stage and with the audience, that you said, this is like almost like what a rock god personification of rock god looks like when you're watching it.
I actually think the two extremes for me were the pub, believe it or not, and I think Hammersmith. They sold out Hammersmith, and they were immense that night. And I know that's a live album now, and that but again, I can draw I can use those two as examples, and they're quite extreme, opposites in terms of scale. And I think that again gives you an idea of there's a different quality to seeing them in a big stage with a huge crowd, and that's got that more kind of rock god kind of feeling to it. But there's a sort of intimacy to seeing them in a pub, on a kind of stage made out of chipboard and a few wooden blocks, and it's equally inspiring, but in a different way. So I think those two stick out to me as the kind of iconic live moments for me personally.
So for everyone out there listening, January 24, welcome to the darkness. I really recommend everyone check out this documentary. Take it from me, who's seen like all the rocket documentaries. This is one of my favorites, I got to say. And Simon Emmett, it's testament to you and your filmmaking skills that this documentary number one got made, because this is a long time coming. You were the guys since like 2017, 2016, and number two looks and feels the way it does. So congratulations to you. And yeah, I hope more people watch this. I know it's had a really good release in other territories around the world, and the people of Australia are going to watch it and they're going to love it as well, because we love the darkness down here. And I'm sure Welcome to the Darkness is going to be a must watch. So thank you for your time and for your documentary as well. It's much appreciated.
Thank you. Thanks for your kind words. Thank you.
Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content.